Welcome in, everyone. We're here with our UAC Masterclass for this month. We do these every month that we don't come together as a group in UAC to highlight something inside of our group that is moving the needle for, whatever people, their respective area of expertise. And so Dr. Jeff Langmaid, I think, is one of the most unique, coolest individuals that a lot of people in UAC might not know. And you just talk about you're missing out on the ninja effect that Jeff has. And I'll even tell a story, Jeff. I first remember meeting you was we were sitting in San Diego at a dinner with Larry Markson. He'd spoken, and Patrick Gentempo and Lori and Jason Deitch and Wendy and myself and you and Jason. And I remember I didn't really know you, and I remember you sat at the end and we didn't talk if much at all. And I kind of knew you were somehow maybe did something with Jason. That's kind of all I knew. And then fast forward, I think that was in the end of the year in November. And then we're in Parker and we're upstairs at the Parker Center in Vegas, and there's the President's Gala. And I was with Mark, and you're there with Sarah, your wife, and so we get to talking, and it was kind of maybe the first one-on-one conversation I remember having with you. And within, I knew you had a podcast. I kind of knew evidence-based chiropractor, but that was my only frame of reference. And then come to find out you had a locum business that you'd been running, and I'm like, well, time out. We have a staffing company, and almost every week somebody's asking us about a locum doctor. So we partnered up with those businesses, and that's how you became, and over time, you handle all the marketing for us at Chiro Matchmakers. I'd say that's probably more of your side gig. So I need to stop talking. But the point is, I want to get into some of the things because what you've done with email at Chiro Matchmakers, I want to share with people. And you have a product to help chiropractors, and we use your product in our offices. It's been profound because I think, like a lot of docs, I just go, yeah, email, okay, whatever. That's kind of old school. But I mean, you literally have driven the growth of our business at Chiro Matchmakers through. So I've seen that firsthand, and I've seen it in our clinics. The other thing, though, that maybe I want to start with before we get into that, Jeff, is when I use the word ninja, I'm not joking. You have one of, if not the most listened to podcast in all of chiropractic. And I don't think people realize that because you're not out there talking about it. And as we talked, sorry, my dog's going crazy. Sorry, everybody. So, hey, Charlie, hold it in. So here's the thing. When you started sharing about monetizing a podcast for me, it blew me away, Jeff. Like, I just had no idea what was possible in a niche space, and the listenership you built and the revenue that you were bringing in from a podcast. And so I could talk to hours with you, but the point of this, I want people to get to know you, and I want them to really learn your genius, because I think a lot of people in the room at UAC haven't really tapped into that by just getting to talk with you. So that's quite a warm up, but let me just steer you in on let's start with podcast. How long ago did you start that, and how'd you grow it, and what's a couple best practices that you think have gotten you to the top of the profession regarding that?
Yeah, thank you so much, and I think your memory serves you well. That's about my recollection in terms of series of events. So I'm coming up on 500th episode. I think I'm on 497, maybe 500 will be out by the time this Masterclass is released, but we're right around there. So it's a weekly show. So everybody can kind of do the math on that. 52 weeks in a year. I think I've missed 2 weeks in almost 10 years.
Yeah.
So it's been a super long time. And some of the things I think that are really important, I guess if I just rattle off a couple of what I'll say is the big takeaways that I've learned that I think are easily implementable, maybe not easily implementable, but are the touchstones of really importance, is format, consistency, and then being able to drive traffic. So I'll hit on each one of those briefly. So format is something that's really important in my experience. And there's a million ways to win, right? So I'm just saying kind of from my experience, which is every one of my episodes is 20 minutes or less. So we say research and marketing in the time it takes to get to your practice. And we release them every Monday at 6 a.m. for almost a 10-year period. That'll be consistency in a moment. But that format matters because it's not like somebody's, oh, it's 2 hours one week, it's 20 minutes the next week. It's like, I don't know how to budget my time or what to expect. So pretty much everybody that listens know that they can listen on the way to work, on the way to their practice, on Monday morning, at the gym on Monday afternoon, whatever, however they do it. They know exactly what to expect. So format, I think, is something that's often overlooked, but is like a critical component of things, just like branding is from if we're on digital space or physical space.
Yeah.
The second one is consistency. Kind of speaks for itself. Consistency is the number one predictor of success in everything in life. It's often the hardest, and for most small business owners and chiropractors, it is the least followed principle. That's the critical component. Having almost 500 episodes is part and parcel to why it is successful. It was not after 5 episodes. It was not after 10 episodes. It maybe was gaining traction after 50, but it took years to be able to see any fruit from that whatsoever in terms of listenership. And you kind of alluded to it. We average somewhere between 9,000 to 11,000 listeners each week. So with what I call about 100,000 chiropractic licenses, about 50,000 buying units in chiropractic, it's probably about 20% of the active profession that's listening on any given week. So a lot of that is format and consistency. And then I think understanding just how to drive traffic. So no magic there, but just making sure that you have a message, like where are you enticing people to go to, pre-roll or post-roll or mid-roll, as they'd say, or in your show notes. Are you making it easy for people to be able to take a next step if there is a next step? So that's sort of a 10 years of experience in maybe 3 minutes there. But that's probably what I would say are the touchstones. I'm happy to get into those, the monetization as well. But as far as being able to drive listenership, probably nothing revolutionary, but the classics hold true.
Yeah, I mean, and just to make the monetization easy, you have built a big enough listenership that advertisers want to buy time to be on your show, and there's where the revenue comes from, right?
That's right.
Yeah, I mean, that was compelling to me, but somebody selling in chiropractic who can get in front of that many people on a weekly basis, there's value to a company doing that.
Yeah, and I think it's for everybody listening and watching, you kind of have to understand what we call TAM, right? Total addressable market size. So in my numbers are not good compared to Andrew Huberman and Joe Rogan. I don't want their audience. Like they're not the audience. I don't listen to that. It's not what I 10,000 sucks compared to somebody who has 100, but like their total addressable market is like 1 billion people.
Yeah.
Like, so it's, that's an important thing. I think all of us need to understand. I'm going to bring this back as a practicing chiropractor as well. Like 1 million followers for a practicing chiropractor, if all you do is practice brick and mortar, is probably horrific because you have 99% of your audience don't live in your circle of practice.
Yeah.
So everybody likes to look at the vanity metrics and understand, and gets all geeked out on that. But Alan, as you well know behind the scenes, I'm much more interested in what the real deal is. Meaning there are plenty of people that could have 1 million podcast listeners, 1 million followers online in an email list of 4, and they can't sell a thing. It's like, well, what are you doing it for, right? Now, if you're doing it just a public service, wonderful, keep going. But if you think you have a business, the metrics need to be backed up. And the backed up means what's the total addressable market size and how much of it do you have? That's where the power, I'm tying this together. That's why I can monetize, is because I have 20% of the entire profession. And then when you compare that to events that might have 200 to 2,000 individuals, and a company might go and spend 10, 20, 30 grand in a weekend to be at those places. Well, being able to sponsor a podcast that has literally 5 to 10 times that reach every single week, you can start to see where this matters, and you can apply that to whatever your market is. If you're selling sleep products, selling nutritional products, selling in-office services, it's like, what's the market size? Where are you at in that? Because the bigger you are, the more compelling it is for a sponsor or a partner to come on board.
Well, and without disclosing, I don't even know the numbers, but just on a very high level, as I'm sure people are wondering, it's literally hundreds of thousands of dollars that Jeff is generating through these sponsorships, and without a staff and a team. So I'm always wowed by that. Jeff, as you talk, I'm reminded of a lot you shared with me. You spent a lot of time at a big conference called Traffic and Conversion. And one of the early things I remember is you'd gone to that repeatedly year after year. And I always feel like a lot of the wisdom you share was born out of your experience, kind of learning from, I mean, everything you just talked about with TAM. And I see that influence in what you've brought to CMM and what you bring into your ventures. Any insights into just some of that knowledge you've learned outside of the profession that you've been able to bring back in and apply?
Yeah, I think the name of the conference was Traffic and Conversion, and it tells most of the story. It's actually a really great name, right? Traffic, how much traffic do you have, and can you convert it? Whether that is on your social channels, whether that's on your website, that tenet applies just about everywhere in some way. And I think the way that we've sort of I'll bulk together a couple things. We always hear jab, 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 right hook from Gary Vee. We hear traffic and conversion from the digital marketer guys, and the way that we've framed that is teach and invite consistently, right? And that's really, I think, in any product, service, offering I have, that's what I try to do, right? It's
Yeah.
aspirational. You're never perfect, but you continue to try to do that, and that speaks to everything. Like teaching, as I would say, are you educating, inspiring, entertaining? That's a teaching moment that affords you the opportunity to then invite, hey, click down below, schedule a call, whatever the case may be, your call to action is,
Yeah.
and then do that consistently. Again, you'll see that word come up time and time again. Those are really, I think, the key things that I've taken away from all of those conferences. Yes, I geek out on the technical aspects of what used to be called funnel building, or anything relative to traffic and conversion and sales conversions. But I think there are just some overarching themes that lay on top of it, regardless of whether you are a social media person, you're an email person. Hopefully, you got a little bit of a few things going on. But regardless of where you spend your time, attention, focus, and energy, understanding that when you teach, and we all see it all the time in the people that we follow, but then often we get tripped up when trying to implement it ourselves. We either get
Yeah.
shiny new object syndrome, which I think almost every single entrepreneur, certainly many chiropractors are victim to, or I love new technology. My friend Josh is always like, "There's never been a software that I've seen that I haven't bought. I buy every software you can, and I geek out on it." But I'm also like, and I hope Alan you can speak into this. It's like I'm like, I'll use something for a decade. Like I am so slow to like I'll adapt new, but I am so like I'll drive it home, and I think a lot of times it's like I need ClickFunnels, and then it's like I need high level, and then it's like I need and docs get caught up in
Yeah.
that, and they never actually build the underlying systems that are necessary for success, because it is a lot more sexy to go to the new software, but quite often it's the consistency. And are you teaching and inviting? Are you showing up? Are you building an audience? Are you curating that audience? That are the factors that matter much more.
Yeah. I find it interesting too, Jeff, because, let's just say it this way. There are some bigger personalities in UAC, uh, that maybe capture that blinky, shiny ideal of the profession. And again, I'll go back to, no offense, I'm not going to call you sexy, but you are consistent. And again, when you share the numbers, I mean, essentially your podcast is oftentimes kind of research based, hence the name, evidence based. What it's not. It's not flashy, but obviously it's speaking to the core of our profession, which I will tell you we see at Chiro Matchmakers, and really even in UAC. UAC tends to attract the operator, the clinically minded, the person who's really building stable, predictable businesses and systems. And it's just, again, remarkable. Like I started the show, like you've got this ninja ability where because you're not the one that's out there in front of the room, um, but the depth of knowledge has been impressive. Now I'm going to use that as a pivot into the other thing that's not sexy, but again, I've seen you do really well is email. Like tell us a little bit about your arc on email and what you're seeing with your product with Patient Pilot, and even please talk a little bit into how you've utilized email over at Chiro Matchmakers to drive so much of our growth.
Sure. I think, For anybody that kind of rolls their eyes at email, I thought email was over 15 years ago. It ain't, and it's not going away. And everybody knows all the stats. But 99% of people open the text. Yes, do that too. But I can guarantee you, if you start texting somebody once a week and you start texting them a story once a week or something that is inspiring, more than one line, they're going to unsubscribe pretty quick, right? Yeah. Text is really great. I'll kind of make a differentiation to start. Text is really great for transactional messaging. You missed an appointment. We have a sale. Like one-liners, two-liners maximum. Like that's where text is awesome, and it can be super, super timely. But it's transactional, not relational. Relational is where emails can sit and still do very well. I can tell you in varying businesses we have varying open rates. But I still use a North Star metric of about 50%. With Patient Pilot, we shoot about 50% open rates. And that's for hundreds of doctors all around the world. So some of those doctors are awesome. Some of them aren't so good. So some of them have great patient experiences. Some of them don't. So that's a really, we have a bell-shaped curve, and we land at about 50%. And I see the same thing in most of the other businesses I'm involved in as well. So your open rates can still be high. That's often why people have an immediate reaction. Is like, oh, but it's 99% via text and 25%, 35%, whatever it might be via email. It's important to know one's transactional, one's relational. So that means with email, you get a lot more latitude to teach and invite consistently, as you see that theme come up. And I've found that a weekly email in nearly every business I've ever been involved in, a weekly email to the entire list is just about the best thing you can do for your business. Now, can you have short bouts of campaigns that go more aggressive? Of course you can. And depending upon your business, might you be able to do 2 or 3 per week? Absolutely. But I'm going to say once a week is sort of that minimum standard threshold that if you are less than that, and I'm going to say over 50% of docs I talk to are like, once a week sounds like a lot. That's like overwhelming. And it's like, no, it's not. And it's just not. So the cadence and the consistency are really important. The other thing about email that I think is very critical is the tracking capabilities. We use this tying back to sponsors on the podcast. We know exactly who clicks every single email. And that data is like really easy to extract. So unlike text, where text you got to jump through 7 different hoops of government regulation. They want to stop you from texting as soon as you text too many people. It's a pain. Email is literally practically wide open. Not that you want to spam people, but you have a lot more latitude to lean in, and the tracking is so much easier and so much better. And once you start tracking, then you can have, as we've done with Chiro Matchmakers, we've done in other businesses as well, you see people starting to click and open, but maybe they didn't convert on the landing page. Well, you can have somebody give them a follow-up call. There's just so much sales opportunity in email that people either don't think about, don't know about, or it's not the sexiest thing, so let me do this other thing where it's like, man, there is so much meat on the bone. And I still feel like I'm continuing to learn and still not maximizing bluntly in any business what we really can be doing. And a lot of it is the simple stuff.
Yeah. So let's talk specifics about what are some best practices to build up a higher open rate?
Yep.
And also, can you address, I think, as a natural concern for any business owner to worry about people opting out because you message too much. So can you talk about those two sides of it?
Yeah, open rate is directly contributed to the subject line. So that's a great question and a really easy one to answer. Your subject line will dictate your open rates, and then your copy in the email will dictate your click or click-through rates. The first step of every email, as the old copywriting geniuses would say, what's the point of the first line of a paragraph? To get somebody to read the second line. That's the only goal. What's the headline? To get them to read the next line. The same thing with an email. The only goal of your subject line is to insinuate the open. Now, don't get crazy and like bait and switch people with like super spammy, crappy subject lines that, yes, drive a massive amount of opens, but then to your point, you'll see a massive amount of unsubscribes. Why? Because you broke trust. They thought they were getting something. Your expectations and agreements, as Stephen would say, are off. So you want to have a good expectation and agreement, meaning the expectation is the subject, what's in the email is going to be delivered based upon the enticement of the subject line.
Yeah.
So your open rates will be directly proportional to the quality, interest, and excitement that your subject lines generate. Sometimes longer works better, sometimes shorter works better, sometimes emojis in them work great, sometimes not. You can play with that, and there's ebb and flow. But ultimately, with all copywriting, you're looking at that ADA formula, right? Attention, desire, interest, and action, which is what you're trying to drive. And your subject line is supposed to drive attention. When you open the email, that's when you get into it: interest, desire, and action, action being call to action. And that's where you look for click through rate. So to come back to where you started, a high don't worry about unsubscribes. 1 to 2% unsubscribes is totally normal. That should be expected, and that means you're doing great. 5%, 10%, 8% unsubscribes or more, that tells you you're not hitting the mark, meaning either your subject line didn't match what was in, or it just seemed super spammy and the messaging didn't work. So, but 1 to 2% of unsubscribes is totally normal. It's list cleaning. That's okay if people go off. They might come back on in the future. Don't stress about it. I heard, I remember seeing Gary Vaynerchuk speak about this years and years ago, and it was like, but John unsubscribed. I thought he liked me. It's like, it's not personal. Like, they can come back. It doesn't mean they're gone forever. So,
It blew me away, Jeff. We attended a conference by a very hated guy a few years back, Grant Cardone. You and I went to his marketing, like a 1 day course. And it blew me away. They asked in the room, how many people have unsubscribed from Grant's list? And pretty much the whole room raised their hand. And yet the whole room was filled with people. And that really illustrated that point to me, is everybody in that room had unsubscribed from his spammy stuff, but they were all still in the room. I found that absolutely fascinating. Um, I love it. I'm curious. Let's talk Chiro Matchmakers. We have different product offerings. We place associate doctors, we place CAs, and we place remote staff, offshore staff to support Chiro clinics. So we right now are running up to like 3 emails a week. So and there's always this balancing act of how much value do we give versus driving somebody who might be looking. And there's even been conversations in our executive meetings like, should we let it rest? Have we stimulated, over blasted, over targeted the group? And it just seems to me like that list is really resilient. Like I don't know. We've been at this now for 3 years and it hasn't really tapered off. Any thoughts on that?
yeah, there's a lot of data from HubSpot and a lot of these big email providers that actually show the inverse of what most people believe, which is the more you email a list, the higher result that you get. Now, obviously, I'm not saying, well, you could just email every single second, and of course you'll aggregately get more. But I mean in terms of a list unused is worthless. Like, the point of the list is to be able to use it. Somebody opted in, somebody said yes, somebody is of a certain demographic, and you reaching out and providing a solution. They might not want it right then, and maybe they unsubscribe. They don't want it right then, to your point with Cardone, but that doesn't mean they'll never want it. It doesn't mean that they won't come back on it. There's anything can happen afterward, but really, there's a lot of data showcasing that the more you message your list, the more the list responds. So anybody that thinks like, oh, I'm just going to wait, I only email once a month because I don't want to bother people. Don't bother. Like, don't bother doing it. Like, you're wasting your time and you're wasting their time, because there's no cadence. Once a month is not a cadence or a consistency, specifically relative to email. That's invisibility. And if you're doing that, you're actually hurting your open rate, you're hurting your click-through rate. We see rises in open rates, rises in click-throughs, and then there's a breaking point, right? And that's where we kind of started, which is like, every business is a little bit different. Some businesses once a week, some businesses are once a day, some businesses are 2 to 3 times per week. But you're going to see an inflection point, like, a curve again, where there's a break even, right? And you start to get diminishing returns. That's an interesting point. And I think as business owners, you do want to push to that point and understand where that point is. And I'm going to say 99% of people stop 10 steps before that point. They're not even close to establishing what it is, which means that you're leaving money and impact on the table.
So we're sort of having two conversations here. One is a B2C conversation, practice owners selling Chiro services brick and mortar. And then we're also kind of talking B2B,
Yep.
maybe evidence-based chiropractor or patient pod or chiro matchmakers. Um, for both cases, people want to build their email list. So what's your recommendation? Can you give some kind of best practices? If people, you're doing the right work of sending these out regularly, you're losing 1 to 2%. You want to be restocking that pond regularly. Any insights on that side of it?
Yeah, it's gotten a lot harder. So that's the bad news. I'm going to say is that
Sure.
definitely has gotten a lot harder to build a list. But it's like yesterday was easier, tomorrow's harder, the next day will be the same, right? 10 years ago we could have said the same thing.
Yeah.
Hey, yesterday was a lot easier than it's today. So that's a normal progression, I think, in all business. So to answer your question directly, I think there's a couple really block and tackle ways that still, I'll talk to people who literally have hundreds of thousands of Instagram followers, and I'm like, have you put out a lead magnet and promoted it consistently to build your list off of your following? And you'd be shocked, and many of them are in the UAC room, and many might be watching right now that are like, I'm almost there. It's like, dude, you should have been doing that when you had 50. You should have been doing that before you opened the account,
Yeah.
was to have that ecosystem and infrastructure in place. Otherwise, you have, drum roll please, vanity metrics, and you're at the whim of Meta. I don't like to be at the whim of Meta. So
Yeah.
my point of saying that is being able to have some sort of opt-in lead magnet, however you want to define that, still is really, really important. In a practicing chiropractor sense, maybe it's on your website, a pop-up that goes exit intent pop-up before somebody leaves. Hey, get the 7 steps to getting rid of low back pain before you leave, and it's a PDF. Like, that's just a super simple, easy example. If it's a business, if you're a B2B company, well, what is it that you offer? If you offer metabolic testing, maybe it's the 5 things you need to look out for that tell you should get a test, right? I don't know what it is, but there's a variety of super easy things, 1-page PDFs. Maybe you can get complicated. You can do videos, video series, and courses. Absolutely, you can do all that. But start with the easy stuff. Just get a PDF up on your website. If you drive traffic to a website, is the easiest place to start. You can also still drive, as much as I complain about Facebook ads and Meta, you can still drive opt-ins there. I think it's a lot more challenging to drive sales. You need to spend really big and then be willing to sort through. And everybody's seen this in their practice. I got to
Yeah.
drive 100 leads. It costs a ton of money, but if I can make the math work out, great. Awesome. That's different than driving opt-ins and leads. You can still drive opt-ins and leads relatively cheap. Driving all the way to the close of the sale in a 30-day period is where things get really expensive.
Mm.
But
Yeah.
you can drive leads still relatively cheaply through paid advertising. But for most people, I'm going to say, start on your website, make sure there's something there that somebody can opt to, and it's not buried, but that it's actually one of the number one things you're trying to do outside of schedule the call or the visit. And then 2, I kind of maybe glanced over this. Promote the damn thing on your social channels. Like, shoot video and call it out. Hey, like,
Yeah.
it's crazy. Hey, the link's in the bio. Check out the new guide and do it all the time. Like, do it all the time. And I know somebody's going to look at this and be like, but I have 500,000 followers. And when I do that, I get 2,000 views and not 10,000 views. Do you want 10,000 views or do you want to have a business? Like, I don't know
Yeah.
what you, and I got a feeling there's a lot of people that want to have 10,000 views. I'm much more interested in having a business.
Yeah. Well said, Jeff. I love it. Again, those are just topics that aren't necessarily sexy, but they really have become the foundation of driving these businesses. And a lot of the value you sure have brought to the things we partnered on, and I know the things that you do for yourself. Any any last parting thought on this conversation?
I'll give a little bit of a shameless plug and say, if any of this is challenging, reach out to CMM, have a conversation with you, Alan, or Mark, because there's a lot of docs that they know these are good ideas, but implementing them is really hard, either technically or just time based, right? And there's no problem with that, but the problem is not taking the action. So one of the things, as you kind of mentioned, and I'll just plug it really quickly with Chiro Matchmakers, is our virtual chiropractic assistants, college educated individuals with all sorts of different skill sets. I use them internally for a lot of what we do. I like to still have my hands on all the copywriting, but for creating graphics, for tracking metrics, for doing research, all of that can be done and help you become way more efficient. So anybody that's struggled to really implement this, if it's in your practice, patient pilot, automated service, we make it super easy. You can see it on my shirt. But if you're looking for this, I'm going to say beyond automated emails in your practice, utilizing a virtual chiropractic assistant is probably one of the best things you can do. Super cheap, super easy, high quality individuals that can help you get way more done than you're getting done today.
Yeah, I don't think people realize like a lot of people hire us to just do the podcast, the editing, the uploading of stuff. You know, the more you can just unload your content on a video or in a microphone and let everybody else take care of getting it how it needs to be scrubbed and put it where it needs to put. It certainly makes life easier. Um, Two last things, Jeff. A lot of people don't realize the years you spent in a rock band, and B, your expertise in the world of boxing. You're a huge boxing fan, which nobody would think to ask you. And three, of those two that we share in common is we've grown a love for F1 together, and we've been to some races. And I just had to throw that out there to wrap it up because that's some of the genius of you that just is like, wait, one time we were sitting and somehow we got talking about boxing, and I'm like, wait a minute. You're like an epic boxing fan, like not just like me who asked about Mike Tyson. You're like watching the
Of
lower.
course.
I love
Of
it,
course.
and not MMA, which is interesting too.
Oh
I
yeah, no MMA over here. No.
mean, anyways, Jeff, I love you. I appreciate you. Thanks for sharing what you did because it's just a little bit of how I've come to know and love you, and the value you've brought to my life and to our businesses, and I hope we tapped into some of that for everybody listening today.
Thank you.
Thanks, brother. Have a good one, man.
See ya.
Yeah, bye.